It's the Friday Night Pint. We're here. Where's the alcohol, Tom? Where's your drink? I've got an empty hydro flask where water once lived. Um, you got water too. We are getting more pathetic by the moment. I think we need to start calling this channel the United Waterfall because you and I have just let ourselves down. What's happened?
It's almost gone from the Friday Night Pint. Yes, I am on the water, but almost if any sort of Seinfeld listeners are with us, the water cooler episode where everyone sort of gathers around the water cooler to discuss previous night's football or the previous night's baseball or basketball, whatever is in Seinfeld. But on Friday nights, I'm on the water at the moment. But hopefully the chat is very exciting and enticing because I missed you this morning. In terms of, I did watch the match on delay, unfortunately. Deary me, but it was one of those ones where my old age had to take the experience decision and watch the match on delay. And ultimately, it was a good sort of match to watch because ultimately we did sort of discuss it was a little bit boring, but that match should be boring. We're 4-0 up or 4-1 up, going away to Spain, and we've also got a big game in the FA Cup on the weekend. So ultimately, Manchester United and Erik ten Hag had to make it quite sort of, as you say, boring. And not often that's pleasing, but I was very pleased with what I saw.
I get you were pleased with what you saw in terms of the result, but yeah, it was not worth the wake up. I'll tell you that for free. Tell you how I'm feeling as well. I'm absolutely exhausted. SJ Bart, good day, mate. Thank you for joining us. If you are new to the Friday Night Pint, it's not going to be your typical professional performance. Now, Tom has made the awfully poor decision to let me host tonight. So this episode could and will go absolutely everywhere. But I will start on Manchester United before I eventually talk about Australia, UK, and US's submarine deal. And our former prime minister abusing our current prime minister. That's really exciting stuff. But Tom, before I get there, let's talk about Qatar. The big news, obviously, coming out of Old Trafford, representatives of Sheikh Jassim, who's obviously represents the Qatar bid for Manchester United, a 4.5 billion pound bid, has to be said, suggests that they took a 10-hour tour of Old Trafford today, which was inclusive of meetings. And the most crucial point coming out of there was to allow Sheikh Jassim's team to review the finances of Manchester United. They've opened the books, the Glazers. What do you make of that? Do you read anything into the meeting being 10 hours of any significant note? Does that fill you with any sort of more assurance or confidence that this deal is finally, or this situation is finally coming to a close? What are your initial thoughts when you read this news?
While we have sort of actual sort of credible information that the Qataris were there or a delegation was there, so there is something to talk about, no doubt. In regards to the news of a 10-hour meeting about the financials, do I believe it? No. Now, I have no idea how these sort of deals work. However, I don't think the Qataris are having a proper financial discussion at Old Trafford. Manchester United's offices, those offices that deal with those sort of discussions are in London. So I don't think they're sitting on halfway or in the dugout discussing how this deal's going to happen. I think this is the Glazers inviting, or Manchester United inviting potential buyers to. It's like when you buy a house, you go and look at the home. Obviously, Old Trafford is the home of Manchester United, so the potential new buyers come in, have a look. Probably it's more so from the club towards them in regards to sort of thank them and make them feel welcome. Hang on, these guys are potentially going to give us £5 billion. We might as well say thank you and buy them a bit of lunch. So I don't buy anything into the sort of meetings. I think those happen in London and America or in the Middle East. I don't think they happen pitch side at Old Trafford. But ultimately, we have seen a delegation from Qatar there. There is no doubt. So obviously the ball is moving there. And by the same reports, or the same people reporting us, that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is due in today. Now that throws an interesting spanner because could you imagine, let's say, Sheikh Jassim, he obviously has sent a delegation to Old Trafford to do, which is right in terms of someone of his stature can throw his team in there to go and do the sort of negotiations and the discussions on his behalf. So Jim Ratcliffe is taking the initiative himself to sort of go visit Old Trafford, or I say visit, but attend Old Trafford. And it would be very interesting because there's a lot of hate around. This is not being picking Sir Jim over Qatar, but there's a lot of hate around Sir Jim at the moment. I'm just thinking, if Sheikh Jassim took the time out of his day to attend Old Trafford, that would be seen as real positive. I'm thinking, well, should we see Sir Jim actually taking the time of day to visit Old Trafford himself? Should we see that as a positive? I'm not sort of siding on the fence either way, but it is interesting how this one has been reported.
Yeah, absolutely. The Athletics Larry Whitwell, who has been on the channel before, he's the one who broke the initial story. And look, in terms of, and I'm not saying this obviously because he's been on here. I'm saying this because I genuinely think Laurie doesn't report on anything unless he knows. And this was his report. So Sheikh Jassim's team were at Old Trafford for 10 hours today. Talks described as productive, information shared on both sides. Next bid expected within 10 days after indicative first offer. Sir Jim Ratcliffe in Manchester tomorrow. To answer your question, Tom, on Jim Ratcliffe, I simply think this is a PR move. I think he is looking for anything to, what's the term I'm looking for? Be a positive taste on the palate of Manchester United fans. I think he knows he's losing the PR battle simply because Sheikh Jassim's come in and flexed his financial muscle. He's made a lot of financial commitments, which you can't help but be attracted to as a Manchester United fan. So if you're Jim Ratcliffe, you know you can't compete with that. You can't promise anything to the extent that the Qataris are. So the next step is to leverage his British citizenship.
But what's the appeal to both Qatar's side and Sir Jim's side appealing to fans? Well, I don't know. Maybe there is a reason, but surely just to the Glazers.
No,
we're not making the decision. We're not making the decision. The Glazers, who pays them more? That's who they'll make the decision for.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tom. If you were spending $4 billion on an investment, the last thing you want are your key stakeholders being unimpressed, vocally against you. It's just negative press.
Oh, that's what. Once the deal gets over the line, then we have our opinions on whoever the new owner is. I'm saying in regards to getting this deal across the line, well, what does it matter if we're happy or not happy? It'll matter if what the Glazers are happy with what's going into their account.
Well, you know what? I think it influences the Glazers. I think it does. Because you have to remember, I think we're not privy to all the details, at least not yet. And all the offers that have come so far are indicative. I think that's the key point here. There is room for the number to go up, to go down. And if either party gets a sniff that they're edging out in front of the other, I think that dictates the price. And crucially, it has an impact on the value of the shareholder value of the dollar. So there's a financial impact to be had here. The more interest there is in Manchester United, the higher the value of those shares go up. Has to be said, that there are a few reports that came out over the last week suggesting Manchester United is valued. There was one forecast that suggested it's worth around £800 million at the moment. Other reports suggesting around the £2 billion mark and even £1.5 billion. So in any case, the Glazers are getting an inflated price, and it will be absolutely interesting to see how this goes. But look, in terms of how you're feeling at the moment, are you edging one way or the other currently, or would you be happy with either party? What are your current feelings in terms of Jim Ratcliffe?
I think that the current feelings have always been very, very sort of straightforward. The Glazers leaving. That's my first thought. That's where my focus is at the moment, making sure the Glazers are not our owners. Now, who's going to be the better owner, Sir Jim or Qatar? That's a discussion for another day. But ultimately, my sole focus is on getting new owners. Do I think Sir Jim's going to be the perfect owner? No. Do I think Qatar's the perfect owner? No. I think it's somewhere in between. Ultimately, I think both options are better than the Glazers. So ultimately, I'm happy. In terms of if I'm a betting man, I think Qatar are heavy favourites for multiple reasons. And also, if I am leaning to a preference over one of either Sir Jim or Qatar, I would potentially lean slightly towards Qatar. And that's not to say, oh, get out of my club, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, you're not welcome. Like the reaction to Sir Jim, let's cast our mind back. When did his name first pop up? Probably a year ago. Was it Michael Knighton came out around about a year ago? I'm not sure. It might have been 6 months or 18 months ago. Let's say a year. Michael Knighton came out saying, I'm ready to buy United and put a consortium together. All I need is for Jim to come forward with the funds. From that moment, a year ago today, the fan base was unanimous. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, come in, save us. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, build him a statue. He's going to make Manchester United great again. Fast forward a year, and a lot of the same voices are suggesting he's going to be worse than the Glazers. Now, I just cannot understand these backflip. Now, this is not me saying I want Sir Jim or Sir Jim's going to be a brilliant owner. But the backflip in regards to the perception of him online has been embarrassing, in my opinion. Now, was it an overreaction saying he was going to make Man United great again at the time a year ago? Probably. Is it an overreaction now that he's going to be worse than the Glazers? Yes, I do think that. So maybe it is somewhere in between. It is interesting just the way this has been reported. And that's not me, as I said. It's not me siding with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. But I think he hasn't been given a fair shake of the bottle in regards to fans' perception in regards to this bid. I do lean towards Qatar. But look, I'm not going to lose any sleep if Sir Jim takes over United.
A fair shake or a fair chic?
You could say that, mate.
It's a really interesting one. I think we'll know more in a week's time. I think with, the fact that Laurie's report says next bid expected within 10 days, I think in 10 days we'll know where this is heading. In terms of your current hunch, do you expect, we have to remember, I don't mean to piss in people's Kool-Aid, but we have to remember partial sale is a suggestion. There was a report earlier this week that Elliott Group were part of the part of the consultation groups that were invited to Old Trafford as well, and have been engaged in terms of partial investment and ownership in Manchester United. We saw that met with heavy rejection online. Obviously, No to Elliott was a global trending hashtag for a period of about 2 hours. And I can name one account that really tried hard. Can I say that there is an adult individual on Twitter? I don't know his name, but he's always like, oh, come on, let's get this hashtag trending. And I'm like, you're a grown man. What is wrong with you? I find it really interesting how adults behave sometimes.
Well, that's the world we live in. People probably say the same thing about us.
No, but like, it strikes me as one of those guys that, like, I feel like if he doesn't get 400 likes on his tweet, he like cries to his partner. Like, I get that vibe.
No, I think that's not just him. Well, I don't know the guy you're talking about. It could be anyone, but I think that's a societal thing in regards to, there is a craving and a need for whether you call it attention or likes or dislikes or whatever it is. I don't think he's a special case. I think it's a very unique situation, which a lot of people do go through. But ultimately, we as fans, we've seen the influence fans can have in regards to this Super League, in regards to sort of the impact we have, or fans across the country and across Europe had in regards to stopping that Super League. Whether it's going to actually go ahead or not, who knows? But fans look like they did have a voice there. Yes, we potentially, in terms of our behaviour and protests and pressure in regards to potential merchandise or whatever, maybe we have somewhat over the years forced Glazers into this position where they don't see a future at Manchester United. But ultimately, so we can say fans have an influence, fans have a voice. Ultimately, in regards to this isolated decision of the Glazers accepting a bid from Qatar or a bid for Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I don't think our opinion matters. And nor should it. That's another discussion. But I think ultimately, I think SJ puts it in the comments as well, that ultimately it comes down to who the Glazers want to sell to. I don't think the fans have any input.
You know what I think has gotten the Glazers interested in selling, Tom? I don't think it's the fans. I think they overrode, they rided out the Super League reaction pretty smoothly. Was it Joel Glazer who made a first statement in his 18 years of ownership? And he said, what did he promise? Regular engagement with the fans, meeting with the fans. Believe he met with the fans once, the late Ian Sterling. Rest in peace, obviously, and condolences to all who knew Ian. But I believe he met with Ian and a few others once at a private meeting.
It was about 6 weeks after that statement. It looked like he's the first of those meetings, and that was it.
It was the first and the last, wasn't it? And it just shows, like, they react to media pressure, but after that, it's always been about money. I'll tell you what it is. Manchester United have been running at a loss for 2 financial years on the run. The stadium is at a point where I think they've known it's needed investment, but it's been all right, and particularly through COVID. I mean, there were no fans in the stadium, no need to upgrade. But I think now that they are seeing that other clubs, others who you'd consider competitors, are obviously investing. They acknowledge there will be a need to invest. Carrington, while it's still state of the art, let's not get it twisted. It's not cardboard boxes and straws out there, but well, it is actually. If you know where Carrington is based, it is dead set in farmlands. But in terms of the facility itself, I mean, it's still state of the art, but it's not what you'd call best in practice or best in the world. So there's a need for investment there. The squad, I mean, we saw when Casemiro's not on the pitch, there's a drop-off. When Rashford's not on the pitch, there's a drop-off. Despite spending £200 million, this squad still needs probably in the region of another 300 million just to compete for the title. And I think with all those things coinciding, let's not forget inflation at the moment. Tom, is your wallet feeling a little lighter these days? I know mine is. I think everything happening at once, interest rates, cost of living, it's now or never to sell.
I think when we
I
have
think they've
a
been
general
talked into a
discussion,
corner.
when we have a general discussion around the Glazers and why they bought United and what they're doing to Man United, a lot of the terms are sort of milking Manchester United dry or draining the club. In terms of if you did do a diagram of it and sort of see the cycle of since when they did take over to what the current climate is now, it is pretty much that. They have milked it as much as they can, and they've got to the stage now where there's nothing left in it. And ultimately, what needs to be done to get back to what Manchester United should be is simply state just those one or two things. One, investment in the squad, which is going to take hundreds of millions of pounds. The stadium is going to cost billions of pounds. And ultimately, that's a decision the Glazers say, well, if someone is offering us £5 billion now, and we only put a couple of hundred million in now, maybe we have taken this club as far as we can.
I think there's an acceptance that they've taken Manchester United as far as they can. The sentiment that I haven't agreed with from fans, because I think it's an emotional one. I mean, personally, while I've been frustrated by the ownership time, I can look at it for what it is. I truly do not believe the Glazers have looked at Manchester United and said, "I'm happy with top four. I'm happy with finishing in the Champions League, or I'm happy with Europa League." There's no way. There's simply no way. But I think there is a realization and an honesty in they're not willing to put in their own money to achieve more, and I think that's the difference. But they simply can't afford it. But let me flip it to you though. You know what the biggest concern is for me with, let's assume the Qatar group takes over. Does that worry you in terms of where world football now is? Because it seems to me
that's long gone.
the top echelon of football is owned
This
by
happened 10 years
nations.
ago. It happened 10 years ago.
So do you actually think the wrong move was actually allowing Manchester City to be purchased by Dubai? Do you think is that the starting point?
It's opened a can of worms that can't be shut now. No doubt. This is the future, and we're going to benefit from it as Manchester United fans. But ultimately, in regards to football, what it means for football and the beauty and the sort of history and legacy and the future of football, it's not what the game should be. It will be used as a political tool. It will be used for other motives. Now, yes, at its core, we're still going to watch the football, and it will be about the 11 men running around on the pitch, of course. But in terms of the business side of things, we have opened a couple of can of worms, whether it be the Premier League or UEFA or FIFA, and the way of the world now. I think in sort of all businesses, but especially sport and football, most notably, are in a situation now where we are at the hands of, as you say, states/countries.
Can I be honest with you, mate? Like, to be honest, I'm going to remove my Manchester United goggles for a second. I want you to fast forward 5 years. Manchester United are very competitive. Newcastle are very competitive. Manchester City, very competitive. And then obviously you're sandwiched in there, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham. I got to be honest, mate. I don't feel comfortable with that. Like, the reality of that just makes me feel upset. I think there's been something beautiful in Manchester United being self-sufficient financially and remaining competitive, remaining the most profitable organically profitable football club in England. I think there's something truly upsetting at its core that when Manchester United next win a Premier League trophy, it might be the pure fact of not promotion of youth, not because there's an ethos of the working class Mancunian and what the club's foundations were built on, but it was a bunch of billionaires bought the club, a bunch of billionaires invested in the club, and because of that investment, they're now top.
Look at our song towards Chelsea. Your success is hollow to Roman Abramovich, because it is. That wasn't Chelsea that won the titles. It was Roman Abramovich who won the titles. Now, yes, Qatar are buying Manchester United because they are Manchester United. Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea because there was a club on the cheap in London, which he wanted to start a bit of a project. Manchester United is obviously the reason Qatar do want to get involved. So there's still an organic feel to that. We could have a rich Englishman or a rich Scotsman or whoever. There is obviously still a bit of an organic feel to the Qataris coming into Manchester United. But ultimately, we rightfully point out Chelsea's success is hollow, because it is. And ultimately, if we do get successful in the next couple of years, I don't think we can sort of argue with fans. Now, yes, again, we do have a good structure and a good history and legacy, which sort of will sort of stand the club in good stead going forward. But ultimately, if an Arsenal fan or a Liverpool fan or a Tottenham fan wants to point the finger at us and say we're only winning because of Qatari's investment and Qatari's money, who will we be to argue?
Yeah. What about the state of the Premier League? Does that worry you? Because if Manchester United, I think You know what's a really awkward and uncomfortable conversation that I don't think anyone is having about this topic? What impact does this have to Manchester City? Because now that Manchester United will be, well, let's be honest. I mean, the Qataris have more wealth than the Dubai ownership at Manchester City. And I just wonder if we're now playing on a level playing field financially. I mean, look, United have spent not much less than City, but in terms of wages, if we can offer better, do you see Manchester City's impact dipping off? Do you think that they'll actually be negatively impacted by Manchester United being purchased by Qataris?
Well, a big part of this sort of sports washing debate over the last couple of years is in regards to rivalries between these states, in regards to trying to get one over their opposition, whether that be Qatar and Saudi Arabia or Saudi Arabia and Dubai. They're all sort of loggerheads with each other, and sort of ego does get involved, politics does get involved, and I'm sure that is part of the decision making in regards to Qatari's involvement. So it's up for them to discuss, and only they know the true motives behind it. But ultimately, would it sort of negatively impact City? I'm not sure in regards to the way the game is going in terms of success. The teams who spend the most money will be successful. So City will continue to spend. So they'll be in and around the trophies. But ultimately, in regards to sort of club status, now obviously they can't compete in regards to status with Manchester United, but there's no doubt they are climbing that tree, both commercially and sort of worldwide. Ultimately, if Manchester United take that extra next step, which is needed under Qatari ownership potentially, it puts City back in their place in regards to, okay, you think you're getting closer. Ultimately, we're back on a level playing field, and just a reminder that you are Manchester City, and no matter what happens, you will never be as big as Man United.
You know what? If City fell away, and I'm all for clubs being successful, to be honest. But if City fell away, and I saw the likes of a Tottenham, for example, replace them in terms of securing regular top four, I would feel much more comfortable with that. I just think there is something about the way City were purchased, particularly, that, I mean,
now you
Chelsea.
say, as I alluded to, Chelsea and City. So, yes, as the point I made there in regards to Manchester United are being bought because they are Manchester United. City and Chelsea were a different kettle of fish back when they were purchased. But can you not make the same argument towards Man United? Won't we be the same club? I know technically not, because the reasons, but an opposition fan could make that argument towards us.
Well, I think the difference is, and again, this will come down to the Qataris, and I think this is something that they need to be mindful of. If they can get Manchester United being profitable without their own commercial fiddling around or back-ended deals or whatever it might be, if they can get this done without being shady, like we're seeing, look, Manchester City are cooking the books. Let's not get it twisted. The fact that Manchester City can report that they make more revenue than Manchester United is absolutely laughable. Yeah. And exactly, your smirk says it all, mate. Like, Manchester City cannot organically compete with the commercial might that is Manchester United. And
I'd say I'd say that's close to my biggest concern with Qatar. In regards, I have no reason to believe they would cook the books or anything. And as I said, Manchester United are their own sort of brand compared to Manchester City, where there's no need to. Obviously, that they can grow, and sort of Manchester United can sort of run itself if the right people allow that to be so. But I'm just thinking in regards to potential, whether UEFA bring in a financial law or FIFA or the Premier League bring in these financial laws down the track, there's some type of conflict of interest somewhere, which I could see potentially, just in regards to the evidence we have of how PSG have done business, how City have done business, even Chelsea to an extent. You just seem, well, if you put two and two together, very similar, that Qatar might make a similar decision somewhere along the track. And ultimately, then could you see yourself in a position where here we are, fingers crossed, and maybe a very likely situation where City get title stripped in 4 or 5 years' time? Could we? That is a potential, and not to accuse Qatar of any wrongdoing, but ultimately in the back of my mind, I do have that potential fear.
I'll come back to my statement before Tom rudely interrupted me in a moment. But where's the raw? Do you think United go the way of what City is trying to go globally, with reference to New York FC, New York City, Melbourne City, etc.? Tom?
100% they will, no doubt. They'll do that 6 months into their purchase. Newcastle, I think, are already on the verge of doing a deal with one of the other clubs. That'll be one of their first things.
Newcastle get Newcastle Jets. I mean, that's just a no-brainer for me. Well, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, it's the same name. Right. Surely they'll look at Newcastle and say, all right, we're going to get behind that. If you were Manchester United, what A-League club would you buy?
Considering Western Sydney Wanderers are 2 minutes from my house, I wouldn't mind Man United investing in them. That wouldn't be too bad. I'd say my local team. I don't support them, but obviously geographically my local side. Other than that, it would have to be one of the teams in the big market, or whether it be Sydney, Western Sydney, or I know Melbourne City is obviously with Manchester City, so you could say Melbourne Victory, but it would have to be one of the clubs on the eastern side of the country. You'd have to say one of the Sydney clubs, whether that be Western Sydney or Sydney FC.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm a Sydney FC fan, I suppose, but I haven't been to an A-League game in nearly 2 years. And if Manchester United buy a Sydney team, Tom, I'll go support whoever they buy. To be honest,
I don't think I would, and not wanting to get behind, but ultimately I have seen what Manchester City have done with Melbourne City. Man City fans go and watch Melbourne City, or if I was a Man City fan, I don't know what I'm going to watch a Melbourne City game for.
Well, I say support loosely. I mean, for different reasons, I just can't get behind football in this country. I know Mark Bosnich obviously has a different view, and he's very much and I think you and I, we're very much in the ballpark of we want football to succeed in this country. Just at a political level, it won't happen.
No,
And,
I don't like my views towards Australian football. I want them to be different. Like I want to go to the A-League games. I want to go watch that. I want to go and sort of invest my time and money into it. But I want to. I know I'm potentially wrong on my side of things. I just can't make that first step for multiple reasons.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. What else is happening in the world? We've covered Manchester United.
Got a Europa League draw in a couple of hours' time. There's some big teams in there. It almost looks a little bit like a Champions League draw. Some big teams, and obviously got the FA Cup. It's a big game now. You mentioned sort of a potential cup treble on the post-match reaction, and big game against Fulham this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Funnily enough, I was at work today, and for whatever reason, I ran into a Fulham fan. I was talking about United with someone, and he was clearly from England, and yeah, he's definitely a Londoner, and he didn't stop short of telling me, "Oh, Fulham are doing well. We're going to beat you on Monday." And I was like, "Mate, you're dreaming." Are you confident going into Fulham?
Yeah, when you say Man United, Fulham, Old Trafford, FA Cup, yeah, very confident we'll go. But if you look at Fulham's situation, they're playing very good football. Manchester United are playing a lot of games, so that fatigue will obviously catch up at times.
I didn't get to talk to you, obviously, this morning, Tom. What did you make of Ten Hag selecting Bruno, Rashford to start? I had the shits. I wasn't happy.
Yeah, I didn't like it. Now, ultimately, in terms of I thought Bruno had a very good game, and Marcus Rashford scores a great goal. And the match-winning goal, so Eric Ten Hag can sit back and say, I got that 100% right. And it's hard to argue with him, and both were taken off injury-free, which was a good thing. I ultimately still think, now, who am I to argue with Eric Ten Hag? I still think he did get it wrong. I don't think the goal was to win that game 1-0, or we didn't have to. We had to not lose at 3-0. Or had to not lose at 4-0. And I think we could have done that with Rashford and Bruno in a pair of slippers back in Manchester, resting up. So ultimately, I still think Eric Ten Hag got it wrong, but he's made 99 right decisions this year, so I can afford him that. And then luckily, the players did come through unscathed. So maybe that Rashford goal gives him a huge confidence boost, and that benefits it this week against Fulham. So ultimately, unscathed. And as I said, progression in the cup. If we get through it on FA Cup semi-final now, I thought when I saw your title this morning say go win the treble, I thought, okay, well, what's this on about? But then ultimately you do look at the situation, you think there is a big chance. Now that Europa League draw, there are some very good teams in there. But ultimately, I'm assuming the bookies probably have Man United as favourites. So ultimately, if we are favourites, that should fill us with confidence.
That's the thing. It wasn't a title intended for clickbait. I think it's a genuine discussion now. The League Cup is won, secured. It's just about how far do we go in the Europa League and the league and the FA Cup. Outside of Manchester City, I don't think there's anyone left in the FA Cup that United should really fear.
Last time we played City, we beat them.
We did, but also the first time we versed City, they destroyed us. And the robot definitely got his. He must have had ChatGPT installed in him, and someone said to him, "Hey, Erling, go score 5 goals," and off the robot went. Tom, have you seen ChatGPT? I haven't had a chance to discuss that with you yet.
I see. I think you sent me something the other day with it, and a lot of people talking. I still have no idea. I still don't know what an NFT is. For God's sake, how am I going to know what ChatGPT is? So, no, I need to get.
You know what is so funny about you saying that? There is no correlation or relationship between those two things whatsoever.
They got through. Yes, but Just the name. You don't reckon that sounds similar in terms of something that's something, then in 6 months' time will be nothing?
Other than the fact they both end with T, no.
But we always
Someone in
get
the
these things
comments
that pop
tell
up.
Tom what ChatGPT is?
But we always get these things that pop up, and in 6 months' time, there'll be nothing.
I tell you what, for the viewers, I am going to open ChatGPT and I'm going to ask it, will Manchester United win the Europa League? So bear with me while I bring scintillating content to our people. But I am definitely going to look this up. You know what? I will ask ChatGPT. Tom, make one request. What would you like me to ask ChatGPT on Manchester United?
I don't know what it is, so I don't know what the bloody hell I'm asking.
It is a language model. It's like, think of it like Google on steroids.
I've got no interest in finding Google on steroids.
Well, mate, look, whether you're interested in it or not, it is going to happen. Ask who are Manchester United drawing in the Europa League. All right, SJ Bart, thank you for participating. Unlike my friend who is 30 going on to 80, 100, Tom. Tom, has anyone ever told you are the oldest 34-year-old I've ever met? You are the oldest 34-year-old in the history of Earth.
Well, you could say the youngest 35-year-old if you're still going 34.
Jesus Christ. Even your humor supersedes you, my friend. But
it's called experience. It's called experience. Right. My decisions you think are old, they're called experience decisions.
It is the year 2023. Manchester United are in the final 8 teams in the Europa League draw. Who are the teams? Who are the teams left in the Europa League? So we've got
Juventus, Roma, Feyenoord, I think one of the Berlin clubs, obviously Sporting, obviously knocked out Arsenal, which was good to see this morning. They're the teams that do spring to mind. So Jose Mourinho, that would be very interesting. I could see a situation where Jose does come back to Old Trafford. He obviously got the Juventus situation with Di Maria and Paul Pogba. They would get a feisty reset. Well, Paul Pogba obviously won't be playing. Thank God that problem. Look, I did like Pogba. I know you like Paul Pogba. He obviously was a divisive character, but thank God he's not at Old Trafford. It was a circus around him, through his own doing, through other people's doing, of course. But ultimately, thank God he's not our problem this year. SJ, is Sevilla going to be tricky? You can also see a situation with them.
If we get Sevilla, we're out. I just feel it in my bones. So SJ Bart, and to all the listeners, I've asked ChatGPT who Manchester United are drawing. I'm going to tell you how detailed I gave this piece of shit. I'm going to show you the level of detail I put into the question. I said it is the year 2023. Manchester United are in the final 8 teams in the Europa League draw. The others include Juventus, Roma, Feyenoord, and Sporting Lisbon. Which club will Manchester United draw in the final 8? And then it goes, as an AI language model, I do not have access to information from the future. Therefore, I cannot predict the outcome of the Europa League draw in 2023 or determine which club Manchester United will face in the final 8. It's best to wait for the actual draw to take place. Useless. Throw that technology in the bin and shove it up your ass. That is awful.
I agree with you 100%, Larry. You could have listened to me 3 minutes ago.
Oh. How do you feel about
Sorry, you muted yourself. Still on mute. I'll talk until Larry.
ChatGPT got upset with me. Let me ask you this, Tom. So the fear with technologies, ChatGPT, is it'll take over the world. It will take our jobs. They're actually talking about by the year 2050, there will be a thing called general artificial intelligence. Do you know what that is?
Do I look like I care?
Well, no, it's really interesting. And this is why I need to ask you the question. So at the moment, any artificial intelligence is built by, so we put in data. So when we search things on Google, there are developers or software developers at Google who then study that data, build it back into the Google search engine, and then it makes Google more prompt to what people say so they can give you more accurate answers. There is a theory that by 2050, artificial intelligence will be able to teach itself. So it will no longer require human intervention in order for it to learn, overtake, supersede any level of information. Does that not worry you? Like serious question. I mean, this is the Friday Night Pint, so I told you I'll take this elsewhere. Does it not concern you that there are people in this world who want to build technology that can be smarter than humans? Like, what is wrong with society? Why on earth would we need such a thing?
The world's gone that way. We've had tastes of that. Obviously, okay, it needs human interaction, human intervention, of course. But you look at the way our phones have taken over our lives; they've changed our lives for the worse, or you could say better in obviously some parts, but worse in others. And ultimately, they're the first steps. Obviously, as I say, that the year 2050 in 30, 40 years' time, you can only imagine the progression. So no doubt we will be in a situation. What was the movie? When was I, Robot set? In terms of when the robots started to make their own decisions. So it's a natural progression, unfortunately, in regards to how intelligent this technology can become. But I want to go back to your first question. I think you were alluding along the lines of to what do you think of Roma potentially coming to Old Trafford with Jose Mourinho. I'm not sure if that was your question.
Similar.
But that would worry me. Jose Mourinho at Old Trafford would definitely worry me along the same vein of Sevilla.
Sevilla's the banana peel for me. I'm not worried about Jose's Roma. They're awful. They're not good.
Oh no, yeah, obviously Manchester United would start favourites, definitely. But yeah, just stories. I don't like stories in cup competitions. There's always potential banana skins.
Now that a bit of time has passed, do you have a bit of a soft spot for Jose?
Yeah, no doubt. I knew at the time, like, look, he had to go. It was horrible at that ending after when Jose Mourinho was still at the helm. Ultimately, you knew that would sort of phase. Like Ole Gunnar, now, obviously, our feelings never wavered towards Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, but that will obviously, amongst sort of the idiots online in terms of their reactions towards Solskjaer, that will fade over time. Jose Mourinho, I think, has come around to that in terms of we did sort of appreciate, I think a lot of us, wrongly so, sided with the Paul Pogba argument on that sort of debate between the two manager and player. I think we knew we were wrong at the time to side with Paul Pogba, but that was just in terms of it was easier to sack one player one manager than get rid of the team. So ultimately we were wrong to do that as fans. Jose Mourinho needed the backing. He wasn't backed. Obviously that's a discussion in and around the ownership and the Glazers and how they treat managers. But yeah, I think a lot of people have come around to the circumstances Jose Mourinho did have to sort of contend with. Now, he was at fault for a lot of his own decisions, no doubt, and deservedly got the sack. But ultimately, yeah, he fell victim to Glazer's ownership, no doubt. So ultimately, I think Jose Mourinho walks back through Old Trafford doors, and I think he gets a very warm reception.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's rewind back through history. Jose, according to a lot of reliable sources at the time, didn't want Luke Shaw, didn't want Anthony Martial, didn't want Paul Pogba. I think if you fast forward now and someone said to you, get rid of those three players, I think Shaw's turned it around. But I mean, prior to this year, I mean, Shaw was awful last season. And then the season before that, he was in the best left back in the world discussion. And I think there's still a conversation at the moment about Luke Shaw to be had, to be honest. I think he's improved a lot, but I wonder, has Shaw improved a lot, or has the system that Ten Hag deployed, has that protected him a little bit? Because against Arsenal at the Emirates, I thought Shaw was horrible. And that's where he was required to do a bit of one-on-one defending against a really tricky winger. So, I mean, there is still a debate. So I guess let me ask you this question. If you fast forward now, so what was that, 2018 he got sacked? So if someone told you in 2023, sell Luke Shaw, sell Martial, sell Paul Pogba, I don't think you'd see too many eyebrows raised.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Luke Shaw. Potentially there's a different argument around him in his current form, but ultimately, yeah, it would be the right thing. Now, obviously, it's a different discussion 5 years down the track. They're obviously different players. Well, you could argue actually very similar players in regards to the consistency debate. But obviously, different time, different situation. But there's no doubt Jose Mourinho had an eye of what it took to be successful. And in terms of the path that he would have taken, that's obviously another debate, whether it would have proven successful or not. But in regards to what Jose Mourinho wanted, he wasn't given what he wanted. So ultimately, if that was the decision by the Glazers, there was a recipe for failure, which ultimately that's how it did end. So, yeah, well, what could have been Jose? I think we all look back now, and if Jose Mourinho went to Manchester United instead of David Moyes and inherited a team of Patrice Evra, Nemanja Vidic, Rio Ferdinand, Michael Carrick, Ryan Giggs, Wayne Rooney, Robin van Persie, if he had that team off the back of winning a title, I think we're in a very different position instead of what David Moyes took us through. So ultimately, I think right manager, wrong time. Yeah, but ultimately, in saying all that, I hope we don't get Roma and we don't have to potentially deal with any Jose banana peels.
In terms of Fulham, do you hold any concerns? Do you look at that team and think United are in a bit of trouble? How do you feel about Fulham going into the tie on Monday. I mean, they are a difficult team, and I think they deserve more respect than they probably get. I mean, recent form isn't great. They haven't, one win in their last 4 games and coming off back-to-back losses. But I think they're a side that when they're on, they definitely can cause trouble.
I don't think it's so much Fulham and what they compose. Obviously, you look at Mitrovic. Obviously, Andreas Pereira is doing well, which I've always a bit of a fan of. Andreas Pereira, thought he was a good player. He's doing very well with that added responsibility at Fulham. But I look at that and I don't think that is the concern for us. I think the concern for us is our own Brazilian in midfield is not going to be there, and how Manchester United adapt and how we deal without Casemiro. I think that'll be where, whether it be Fred or Sabitzer, you'd think likely it'll be Fred and Sabitzer lining up together, how they perform. They're going to have to be at it, because if they're not at it, it could be a tricky afternoon. But ultimately, that's where I think our concern should be, not so much the opposition, but how we replace Casemiro.
Is Anthony Martial playing this game, Tom?
I'll throw it to you. I won't be shocked if he's not involved in the matchday squad.
I don't know what's going on with him. There's a part of me that wonders is he fit, but Ten Hag's just had it. And he's like, I don't want to deal with him anymore.
Well, that's the point I made to you. That's the point I made to you in regards to if Anthony Martial and Weghorst are fit and ready to play. 100% for me, play Anthony Martial, of course. Far better footballer, far better for Manchester United. But what's the point of Anthony Martial coming and scoring a goal, maybe winning a game, if he's going to be out for the next 6 weeks? Wouldn't Weghorst be better in that game and try and give him confidence? So we have Weghorst ready and available, fit and firing for when Anthony Martial is injured. So there is a case. Yes, Anthony Martial should be first choice striker if fit. But when he comes back, Weghorst needs the confidence. Now, obviously, Weghorst in a unique situation. He's run himself into the ground. He needs to rest the poor guy. But that is where this debate around our first choice striker is so interesting, because the guy who should be first choice striker will be injured next week. So really, should he be first choice striker? So, because I thought Weghorst today, I thought you replace Anthony Martial with Weghorst. I think we beat Real Betis 4 or 5-0. I thought Weghorst, well, look, he was running even in injury time, 93rd minute, he was still closing people down. Like, nothing but respect for that. But ultimately, as a player, well, now we've seen more and more of Weghorst. My God, he's a Burnley striker.
He definitely is a Burnley striker. But Tom, give me a score prediction. Manchester United, Fulham. How do you see it going?
Yeah, it might be an interesting one. It might be one of those, well, I'm not predicting a 4-3 or anything, but it could be one of those sort of high-scoring games in terms of it's the last game before the international break, of course. Players' minds could be here and there and everywhere. So let's go 3-2 Manchester United. A little bit of excitement compared to what we did see in the second leg against Real Betis. But ultimately, knockout football is about winning. So I don't care about the performers. I don't care about the scoreline, as long as it does favour Man United. And ultimately, if we do find ourselves in an FA Cup semi-final, by the time we do know that, we'll obviously know who we have in the Europa quarter-final. We could be looking, as you mentioned about 12 hours ago, in regards to potentially some type of cup treble.
Absolutely. I mean, let's not forget Arsenal. I mean, in terms of the last results, Arsenal beat Fulham 3-0 just a couple of days ago. So they're not coming into this tie with a lot of confidence. That's for sure. But it is a cup tie. Anything can happen. So it will be absolutely interesting to see how it all plays out. But Judy Sports saying he thinks Sheikh Jassim, if successful, will do what Manchester City Group have done and offer a much better worldwide scouting network. Yeah, I think United's scouting network is quite good. In terms of numbers, at least, I think it could definitely do some refining and be a bit more targeted, though. And you mentioned Polina in midfield could be a worry running the midfield. Do I even know who Polina is?
Look, they've got some very tidy players for them. In regards to, they do play some decent football, and they're one of those. I remember in terms of the reason they did catch a lot of people's eye. I think it was the first game of the season they played Liverpool. There was a 2-2 draw.
Yeah, Mitrovic.
It was one of the first games, but it was a case of, okay, the result was good for a Manchester United fan and not for a Liverpool fan, but is the case that they actually played Liverpool off the park and played really well. So I think a lot of people have kept an eye on Fulham this year. And as I said, Andreas Pereira is playing very well, kind of in that number 10 role. Obviously, a much preferred role. He's played a little bit too deep at Old Trafford at times, but fair play to Fulham, because not many teams do come up from their championship and have the season they are having. So fair play to them. Fingers crossed they get absolutely smashed this weekend. But well, it will be a tricky tie.
It will indeed. But I think that's a good place for us to leave the show. So hope you've all enjoyed the Friday Night Pint. we're on our way to 2K. So make sure you do subscribe if you are new. And if you do enjoy the show, and if you did enjoy the show, make sure to hit a like on the video. That makes me and Tom very happy. I'm about to go pass out in my bed, Tom. I'm absolutely exhausted after the 4 a.m. wake up. I'm sure you are too. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you after the Fulham match. Cheers.